Good morning, everyone. We're going to hold the commission meeting first, and then the Board of Directors meeting. I would call the commission meeting to order. Just call your attention to item that's on your table. We have a revised agenda as well as some information from Adrian. So, first item is a consent item. We have the treasurer's report and the secretary's report. Are there any adjustments, changes, corrections, anything to either one of those? If not, I entertain a motion to approve both of those.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. First item under action item. Mike, do you want to start with that one?
Sure. Mr. Chair, as you know, CenturyLink filed an application. We went through the process of advertising, and we had a public hearing. The main thing I want to say is that the executive committee met, and we just want to make it clear to the full commission that we are simply just voting on an application today. We're not voting on the franchise agreement, because sometimes not only our board but other boards and commissions throughout the Twin Cities were confused on the process. So again, when it comes down to a vote, you're simply voting on that the application is complete. So I will turn it over to Adrian Herbst to talk a little bit about this.
Okay, thank you. You should have several materials relating to this item, maybe just to help you here, make sure that everybody's got the right materials in front of them. There would be one memorandum to the members of the commission, that's from Al Mattson, and then the executive committee members. Then there's a second shorter memorandum that is from my office to the commission. And then lastly, a thicker document that is basically the CenturyLink application that was delivered by courier to Mike Johnson on March 18. Now, I think perhaps the easiest thing is if we could turn for a moment to the memorandum that is from the executive committee to you, the full commission, that describes their review of that much larger document, the application of CenturyLink. And what this is really about is there's a lot of process involved, because you've got an ordinance that this commission has adopted. You have the existing franchise with the Comcast Cable Company. You have the Minnesota law, you have the Federal Cable Act, and you have the rules of the Federal Communications Commission. So somewhere there, all of this has to come together. And the meeting today for you is to really decide whether or not the application that's made by CenturyLink in response to your request complies with all of those different legal requirements, including whether or not all of the answers that they've provided or the information that they've provided on their application document, the thicker document that I've indicated to you, is complete. Now, this first memorandum then from your executive committee basically states that the executive committee in their meeting and reviewing all of these materials has determined and is recommending to you, the full commission, that the application is complete. Now, that's very important, because we have some rather tricky legal requirements that say that you as a commission can decide if the application is complete. And once you decide it's complete, that triggers a time period, a legal time period that you have to review or negotiate together with the CenturyLink company a franchise, to see if you can negotiate, put together with them a franchise. And basically, the law talks about a 90-day period of time or a 6-month period of time, depending upon whether or not the cable company is already in business or has some service in place in the community. Pardon me? Yeah. Leslie's reminding me, that's a guideline. It's not cast in concrete, in other words. These matters certainly can be flexible. And as you all know, to try to negotiate something with another party, if something can't be worked out within those time periods, certainly the parties can agree to extend the time itself. Now, The memorandum and what's involved in the application form, if you were to turn, for example, to page 3 of this memorandum that I'm referring to, you'll notice in paragraph 2 there, it says CenturyLink's application complies with the state application requirements. The broad categories that were reviewed by the negotiating committee, there are 7 different things that they've provided all the requisite information. They provided a description of the proposed area that they intend to serve. They've outlined the legal requirements. They've outlined their financial qualifications. They've outlined technical qualifications that they have. They've outlined additional information. And I might just say that the application that was put together for them to respond to by the commission was quite extensive. And the reason was to be sure that rather than just using a bare bones application that the law provides, because there's an existing operator and because you already have services, you wanted to have as much complete information as possible. So the application includes a great deal of additional information about the company, their services, and so on. And as you know, also, there's an application fee requirement. They're not in business right now in the community. They're not paying you a franchise fee. So the costs that you incur in working together with them, reviewing the application, and negotiating with them a franchise, and all of the expense that you incur from your staff or from our office as well, is reimbursable as an application fee. Now, the remainder of this memorandum discusses very briefly or highlights the information that I just outlined above, those 7 different items. There is discussion of each of those items, including a description of the area that they intend to serve in your communities. And you may recall that one of the last meetings, CenturyLink had maps here, met with you, and showed where in each of your 9 communities they intended to provide their initial services. The initial build-out of the cable system, for example, will probably be somewhere in the range of 15% of the communities. We have a matter under Minnesota law that requires that the cable system be complete within 5 years. There has to be discussion about that term or requirement with CenturyLink. How they will build out once they initially start building their system and extend to other areas and so on is also a matter that has to be dealt with in the whole process. So without going into a lot of detail or trying to read this for you, this is what this memorandum is all about. It's trying to provide a description to you on each of those 7 items that I listed above. Now, the second memorandum, which is much shorter, that I want to refer to you, is from my office to the commission. And basically what we're trying to do here is explain what the process is and what you are to do today. There are 2 things for you as a commission to do today, and which will require your vote. One is to make a determination or accept the recommendation of the executive committee that the application is complete. And of course, what I had indicated before, by making that decision, you are triggering or starting the negotiation process, be it 90 days or 6 months, the way the law describes. So that would be one motion and for your approval. The second motion would be to direct your negotiating committee to coordinate with and to meet with CenturyLink and to begin the process of working together to develop a franchise that can be recommended to you, the full commission, for approval during one of those time periods that would be applicable or agreed to. Now, if you go to the second page of this, you'll see we have a checklist. There's quite a lot has been done. There had to be published notice of the intent to franchise. Once the application had been received, a publication was published in each of your community newspapers. That wasn't just focused only on CenturyLink, because the Minnesota law says you have to advertise or publish that the intent to franchise, which means anybody or any cable company that would have an interest in providing a cable service would have the right to submit an application. CenturyLink was the only company that had submitted an application at the deadline of March 18. The public hearing was held by this commission on April 16th. That's the second thing that was required. At that public hearing, after you determined CenturyLink was the only applicant, you then directed your executive committee to meet with CenturyLink and to determine whether or not this application was complete, which is what we just talked about. And they met on May 8th to make that decision. And then the next item is the commission meeting today to do those two items that I just described. That is, accepting the application as complete, number one, and number two, directing your negotiating committee to go through the process. Now, the remainder of this memorandum describes a little bit about the application review for completeness. It also describes the process of approval of the application and what's involved in the analysis of the qualifications and working together with the negotiating committee. And ultimately what happens is, once the negotiating committee feels that it has worked out a franchise, a new franchise with CenturyLink that's workable for all 9 communities, that puts into play another process that has to be involved because you're 9 separate cities. Then this commission will look at the recommendation from the negotiating committee and determine whether or not the proposed franchise is in a form that the commission can recommend. And it will send to each one of your 9 cities the proposed new franchise agreement for CenturyLink. And there's no action that's required by your 9 cities individually other than to make comments or suggestions to the draft franchise agreement. When all of those 30-day time periods from the 9 cities come back, the commission would then meet again. And at that time, assuming there is no change that is recommended for the franchise, the commission would advertise or publish notice that it's going to adopt a franchise, granting a franchise for cable services to CenturyLink. Tried to explain this in the least complicated possible way, but as you can well imagine, because you're in 9 cities, there's a lot of process involved. The good thing is you are different than anybody else in this entire metro area because you're the franchising authority. Other areas, you may have 7 or 8 communities that are working together, but they just administer the franchise, and in each one of those communities, they have to separately go through this process of publishing notices, actually granting the franchise and so on. You're the franchising authority, so it's just you that would ultimately be granting the franchise on behalf of all 9 cities after you've gone through that process. So it does take a period of time here. Just because of all of these requirements for publishing notice, the public hearing requirements, review by each of the 9 cities and so on. Ultimately, what's important here is that they have the legal, technical, and financial qualifications, that they will provide services that meet the needs of the community, that there's a time period for building and constructing the system that is reasonable and can meet the requirements of law. And most importantly also, there is what we call a competitive equity provision in the franchise with Comcast, and there is in Minnesota law as well, which basically says if you grant a franchise to a second or subsequent cable company, it should be fairly comparable in terms of its requirements to that of your existing cable company. So that is a very brief overview of the process. I know that the negotiating committee will work very hard on behalf of the commission to develop a franchise that makes sense, is workable for CenturyLink, and is fair and reasonable from a competitive equity standpoint. I'm sure that you have questions or comments because this is a great deal of material, and it would be more helpful if you ask any questions. We'll be pleased to answer them for you or help you to understand the process better.
Any questions for Adrian or Leslie?
In your last comment, you talked about fair and comparable. Is the applicant allowed to exceed dramatically the current cable company?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And, that's also a very a good question. When you say comparable, it doesn't mean that each paragraph, each provision of this franchise has to be exactly the same. The way the law works is taking the franchise as a whole are the obligations and commitments and requirements of the new cable company reasonably comparable to those of the existing company.
No less burdensome.
And what?
And no less burdensome.
Yeah, and no less burdensome. Yeah. Yes.
Adrian, does that mean that Al and I talked briefly of possibly it may make more sense to do Osseo in like 1 year since we're smaller than most neighborhoods here? Does that mean that we would not be able to require that kind of a provision rather than a 5-year build-out?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think as a general rule, they've talked about what the initial service area would be. They haven't said, for example, that any one community is going to be built out completely, but I think it's definitely a fair question that can be asked during the negotiation process. There may be a smaller community where it simply would just plain made sense from a construction standpoint to build it all out as opposed to a smaller piece of the community. A larger community would be different. I mean, Osseo being a small community area-wise, maybe just like sort of a neighborhood of a much larger community, And so I would think that, frankly, it would probably make more sense for them to do that. And I think it's definitely a question to be noted that we can discuss with them in the negotiation process.
We'd like to ask the negotiating committee to do that, then, if we could.
I should say too, because something that's really important for you folks, and we spent a lot of time, it seems like we've been in negotiation for the past several years because we just renewed the franchise with Comcast. And so there's been a lot of discussion about a lot of these things. As you know, with Comcast, we worked out a very, very favorable provision regarding public educational and governmental access and the funding for it, and the types of channels that would be in high definition, and how many channels there would be, and so on. There again is a matter where there could be differences, but at least the commitments and obligations should be comparable.
Just so, I'll go on record, this is not a negotiating process today, but CenturyLink is here, and I'll go on record as saying that personally, I think that there needs to be adjustment for each individual city.
Mm-hmm.
If I was the administrator in Osseo, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I got 1 square mile, almost everything in Osseo is overhead. They could probably build out Osseo in 30 days. So other communities are a lot smaller than, Plymouth, and, well, okay, 45, Doug, I'm sorry.
And you're going to stay until this is finished, right?
Assuming we get it done by October 30, yeah. Anyway. Anything else for Adrian and Leslie? Questions? First motion would be to file the application made by CenturyLink as a complete application.
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. Further discussion on that first motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Second motion would be to direct the negotiating committee to commence the franchise negotiations. Entertain a motion for that.
So moved, including the Osseo provision.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion on that All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anything more on those two items, Adrian? Leslie?
Well, the only thing is, I think you have an item on here where your negotiating committee has a spot that has to be filled.
Right, we do have a vacancy. so-
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. As was just commented, we do have a vacancy on the negotiating committee. Mike, do you want to touch on that?
Mr. Chair, we have a 7-member negotiating committee. The current roster and committee assignments were included in your packet. It was like in the second page. Looks like this. We have all the various committees listed there and all the members. This is to fill a vacancy when Brooklyn Park City Manager Jamie Verbrugge was appointed the Bloomington City Manager, so he then went off the commission. We put in there the type of time commitment for this committee. It's probably one of the busier committees of the Cable Commission. And like we were talking about earlier, the Comcast franchise took about 3.5 years to work on, but again, we hoping CenturyLink doesn't take 3.5 years. In fact, we're confident it'll go fairly smooth. But just in terms of future time commitments, we wanted to let everyone know that. And typically, when we meet, it's usually in the morning, around 8 or 8:30 in the morning, and the meetings last an hour or two. Brooklyn Park Cable Commission member George Lassard, who could not be here today, has expressed strong interest in serving on the negotiating committee. And certainly, though we, as part of our process here, we open it up to anybody who's interested. So that's where we sit, and so we'd like to get somebody appointed to this to the committee before we begin negotiations.
Mike?
Would it be appropriate for me to make a motion to appoint George Lassard to the negotiating committee?
Well, first of all, is there anybody else that has any interest of being on it? Okay. Mark, there's candidate number 2. Anybody else? It's a fun group. Okay, we have 2 candidates. How do you want to handle this?
Well, I think in the past, I think when we had 2 interested, I think there was like a little vote on
paper.
pieces of paper.
Right.
So Wendy, I don't know if, I think I have. How about if we do this? Little Post-it notes? Want to just go around? Everybody, this would be for the Cable Commission members only. So if you're not a Cable Commission member,
You're saying we don't get to vote?
you don't get to vote. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
on my ballot, I'm going to write down who I'm voting for, then I'm going to put my name on, because I don't want anybody claiming that I had a secret ballot that violated the Minnesota Open Meeting.
Spoken like a true attorney.
Glad you pointed that out. This year, board has their own mall.
I have to write your name on my ballot, too.
Thank you.
and then we'll have Wendy collect them starting on that end, and then she can count them up, and we'll do the canvassing. Yes. In the meantime, while Wendy is counting up the votes, we'd like to give Kirsten Surslin an opportunity from CenturyLink to make a comment.
Okay.
Sure. I just wanted to thank all of you for your hard work on this, and thank the staff for putting this together and approving the application. Obviously, I will not be around this summer, but you'll be in good hands with Patrick Haggerty. I'll be back in September. I really look forward to working with you, so thank you for all your hard work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your partner has retired then?
She has. She's retired on May 31st.
Okay.
I believe she's somewhere in the British Isles on cruise.
No. Good for her. Okay, the votes are being tabulated. Suspenses.
And while we're waiting for the tabulation, we will probably begin meeting with the negotiating committee sometime in June. We'll probably set up, we'll coordinate with CenturyLink to find out their availability, and I think the best way to do it is just put several dates on the calendar that we can all agree to and just try to stick to it, and if things go quicker, then we can always cancel a future meeting, but we'll put them all on paper, especially with summertime and vacations. We want to make sure that we get all those schedules locked into place. So,
Mr. Chairman, Marshall's has 7, George Sarge has 4.
Vote has been taken. Need a motion to appoint Mark to the negotiating committee? Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, carried. Now, you know what you're in for. We'll tell you that after.
Let's go.
if only all elections could go this quickly.
That's the truth, yes. Okay, next item is item number, where am I here? 5. That is the receipt of FCC 394 filing withdrawal by Comcast due to the ending of the negotiations of Comcast and Time Warner. Comcast is not moving on with that, and so you can explain that further.
Yeah, it's just a formality. The Form 394 is a transfer of ownership form that was filled out, and basically when the entire mega merger between Comcast and Time Warner fell through, or the proposed merger, they basically sent a letter saying that it's official, we are not going to pursue this transfer of ownership anymore. And so it's just to acknowledge receipt of the letter for the 9 cities.
So moved. Motion's been made. Is there a second? Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Wendy, yes.
Donald is not on the commission. Donald is not on the commission, is he?
Oh.
Donald seconded, he can't.
6 to 4. We're I don't know
I
how you
seconded
voted.
that,
so-
too.
Did you, okay, I didn't hear you, Bill.
Okay.
Okay. Did we finish a motion on
Yeah.
this item? Okay, all right. Item number 6, League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust Liability Waiver.
So, Mr. Chair, this is a formality we go through every year, as does the cities. We are insured through the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, and basically all we're saying is by doing this action, you are affirming that the Northwest Suburbs Cable Communications Commission is simply requesting that the liability coverage are equal to the statutory limits.
So moved. Motion's been made. Is there a second? I think I heard a second. Mike? Or
Second.
Kirk? Okay. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Mission, purpose, goals, and future visioning. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We brought this subject up at the last executive committee meeting, and it was decided to put this concept forward to the full Cable Commission. As you know, we've been around since the early 80s, and we started out actually doing programming in late 82, early 1983. And then somewhere along 1988, we developed kind of this mission of subscriber satisfaction to, make sure that whatever we're doing, that the cable subscribers, are enjoying the programming and the concepts we have out there, and then all the work we do with our cities. And we've developed mission statements over the years, and the mission statement that we have right now, quite frankly, is really out of date. But what we want to do is both look at our mission statement and also develop some type of vision statement for our organization. And when we talk about visioning, we're talking about knowing, who we are, where we're going, and what will guide this journey. And in terms of our mission, everybody has a mission statement. Not everybody has a vision statement. Our vision, really, quite frankly, was set by the early Cable Commission members and And even further back than that, the two gentlemen who were responsible for kind of putting this thing together, Jack Irving and Ray Stockman, had a vision a long time ago, and we're living out that vision today in terms of, Ray always said we have a story to tell, and we want to put this money back into the local communities and do quality programming. Well, that vision that Ray had back in the late 70s and early 80s, we're living that vision today. And we're not saying here that we're abandoning that vision that he had. We don't really necessarily have that on paper, his vision. We've been living it without it being in writing. But in terms of the mission, we've been fulfilling a lot of the goals and the needs of the cities. What we want to do is simply take a look at this, and we think a vision is important because it shows good leadership. It starts with a vision, and it's about going somewhere. And with the beginning of both Ray and Jack and the commission in the early days set that vision, it helps us keep focused, get energized, and get results. And it can also keep you going during times of adversity. And I think that has, through these days, we've gone through many ownership changes. We've gone through many threats of revenue, possibly losing, revenue from the cable company and that type of thing. And those are times of adversity. But certainly, we just need to take a look at things. As I look at our current mission statement, goals, and purpose, I mean, right now there's not even words like diversity in there or anything related to apps and internet and that, because back then when we started, there really was no internet. There weren't, in fact, we started out with typewriters, IBM Selectric typewriters here, and things have changed dramatically. But the core mission of doing this quality local programming will always remain. We simply just want to take a look at the process and get cable commission involvement and board involvement as well. And so we just, as we go through this, as Commissioner Jim Willis said at the executive committee meeting, if you're going to do anything, let's just make sure there's some measurable things that we can look at and we can measure the success of that vision and mission, and certainly we would want to do that. So we just want to bring it forward, and there is no, at this point, there's not a specific timeline in place. We just don't want the train leaving the station going too far down the road without, true buy-in from this group of at least looking at the process. We may come full circle and come around and, but at the same time, I want to assure members that we're not, the goal is not to leave the core ideas and vision that both Ray and Jack and the early commission members had and board members about community TV. And so this process could take some time because we, first off, we want to do it right. And secondly, this year is really a crazy year in terms of going into high definition, so staff is at an all-time busy peak right now, but we certainly want to start the process rolling at staff level, get board involvement and so forth and so on. And so the executive committee thought that would be a good idea to bring forth to the full commission.
Okay. Input from commission? None? Everybody's happy with what was been presented?
Well,
Bill.
so what do you want us to do? Do you want us to make our suggestions to you via email, or what would you like us to do?
I would think at some point, I think when you go through these processes, I think you also look at data. We've got data, we've got old data, we've got some current data, and we've got old surveys. But I think we do want to poll our current. First and foremost, we do want to. We consider this like the core group to start with, and so we would actually. Ask at some point formally for input, possibly get a facilitator together. We've talked about this at the executive committee meeting, that maybe we get together in a separate meeting at some point down the road and simply just talk about who we are and where we want to go. So, and do it in that form. So, but in terms of early on, I wouldn't, unless you want to forward some ideas right away, you can certainly do so. I'd welcome any ideas.
I would encourage, if you have any thoughts, get them to Mike, email, phone call, letter, whatever you prefer.
And if anybody has worked with any professional facilitators or strategic planners or visioning folks out there, certainly pass their name on my way. I'd love to talk to them. Dave Kaiser is going to be very involved in this process at staff level, and him and I are going to be talking further about where to go. But we certainly, like I said, we want to make sure that this group is all on board with some type of process.
It is a work in progress, so it's not something that's cast in stone at this particular time. But we'll take a tweaking as we go on, so. Did you want a motion to accept, or? Sure. I'd entertain a motion to accept as it's presented today, but noting that this is a work in progress. This is not the final plan as submitted, but
So moved.
continue work on it. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
And second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Exhibit number 8 was an added item to your agenda. Mike or Adrian, which one of you?
I'm going to have
Leslie?
Leslie
Okay.
review it, okay?
Is that okay? I know this is a really long document, so I'm not going to go through detail by detail. I just want to give you an overview, but then, once you've read it, if you have any questions, please call one of us, and we'd be happy to explain it to you. One part of our job that we do on a regular basis as a commitment to you is to monitor and make sure what's going on at the federal level, any rules that are coming out, that might be of concern for this group, and especially since the core mission is being able to provide quality programming, and because the franchise that we currently have with the existing provider, Comcast, is what provides for all of the PEG programming. We need to make sure that PEG programming is still funded. And if you've heard a lot in the news about people cutting the cord, what happens when people cut the cord, which is the cable cord, and they are getting all of their programming over the internet, that means we've lost that funding from that particular person for our PEG programming. So as people cut the cord, the amount of funding that we get, the $1.36 per subscriber fee, goes away. We want to make sure that we can protect this video programming for the future. And one thing that we have been able to do is write this letter saying anything that is gone through a cable company that is because it's attached to the agreement that the cable provider has with the individual subscriber should still be included under the fund. So if they still have a cable contract, but they're getting services over the top through their internet, that still should be coming in, and that person should still be considered for funding us. So we wrote a letter to the FCC on their notice of proposed rulemaking, saying exactly what I'm saying, is that we depend on these funds. We have depended on them for a long time. We still need these funds. Is that helpful in my explanation of this? It's protecting our future, and then we'll see what happens. And I will report back to you probably at the next meeting on whether or not the FCC has made a decision and how we should go forward to be protecting the funds that we have with PEG funding.
It's, as we all know, there's so many changes going on. There's what you call Xfinity Mobile. It's not coming through the cable that's in your house to your television set, but somebody that's going down the street can receive video programming from Xfinity. You all hear what you call a streaming video through the internet. It's not the cable service coming to your home from the cable that's inside your home, but it's still the video service that's provided by the cable operator. And what Leslie is saying and what's before the FCC is those same services, whether they come through the wire that is in your home or delivered in some fashion, is still a subscriber commitment and should be part of the fee obligation that they have to support PEG access programming. And so the FCC is wrestling with that, and you as a commission, you may recall at the last commission meeting, approved sending a a resolution from this commission to the FCC saying, look, we have a big stake in this whole thing. We want to make sure that the PEG access programming can be preserved. And just because there's changes in the way services are delivered to subscribers doesn't mean we should lose out, is the bottom line.
Any questions of Leslie, Adrian? We need any official action, or is it just an
No,
FYI?
we're
it's
just letting-
just an
Okay.
update to let you know that it has been filed and
Okay.
under study by the FCC.
Okay.
And we're
All right, good.
continuing to monitor and make sure that anything that comes out, we will bring forward to you.
And another example I just mentioned moments ago about the goals in the future, about adversity. I mean, this could have a major impact if somehow, on a technicality, they say, well, you can no longer collect franchise fees or PEG fees because it's going over the internet, which happens to be on the same cable that's currently sending the cable line, the cable signals anyway.
Okay. Anything else to come before the commission? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Commission's adjourned. Marcia?
That brings us to the Board of Directors meeting, and did you want to change the order?
I think we're good in terms of staff time, right, Tim? Okay. We're
Okay,
good.
so the first thing on our agenda is the consent items, the approval of the minutes, and the approval of the treasurer's report.
Approval?
Got a motion, is there a second for somebody?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor of the consent items, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, next item is the report from the Policies and Activities Committee. And I
Yes.
think Tim Gafford is going to give us an update.
Yes.
Hopefully I don't have headset here.
Having a bad hair day?
Bad hair life. Thank you. Policy and Activity Committee met twice on March 31st and April 28th. There were several topics of discussion that had come up following the incident at New Hope back in January. And so the group met to discuss these topics. Marcia, Ann Morris, Bert McDonald, and Dr. Wayne Horn for sitting on that committee, as well as Mike and I were present. Also at our first meeting, members of the New Hope City staff were present to give us a lot of great insight and input. We had the police chief and city clerk, city manager, and also our communications coordinator there, and gave us a lot of input on possible considerations for safety procedures. The committee decided to conduct a survey of our 9 member cities for input as to what they have in place now for procedures, what they think should be in place for policies and procedures, and we received written survey responses from several cities, met in person, or will be meeting with representatives from the rest of the cities. Some of the cities had decided, or the city police chief said, let's just talk about this in person. We don't want to commit anything to paper. Some of these things are not for public consumption. Based on the feedback from the survey and directly from those we met with, we've come up with a plan of action. Try and make the working environment for our staff safer by implementing some new procedures, providing them safety information that they weren't previously given or hasn't been posted in control rooms, such as exit routes, severe weather safety, shelter areas for their particular location, those types of things. Our goal was also to come up with a fairly simple set of emergency broadcasting guidelines for the on-site Northwest Community Television staff who are broadcasting the meetings, recording them. Generally, those guidelines are fairly simple. Ensure your own personal safety first. Then, if possible, for the on-air and recordings, put up a recess graphic, turn off the audio, and then stop broadcasting, web streaming, and stop all recordings. And then follow the emergency procedures outlined for your particular location, the type of emergency or whatever is happening. Another aspect to this is the concern about incident video being available online after an incident takes place. In the New Hope situation, it was set to automatically be available to the public online after upload. So we're making a recommendation implementing a guideline that will no longer make the video available automatically after upload. So somebody will have to go into the system and most likely the next morning or later that evening and make the meeting video public. So that means there's going to be a little bit of a delay before your meeting is available to the public, but that gives us a chance to make sure that there wasn't an incident or something that shouldn't have been broadcast. And then these are really, only in extreme situations where it's probably going to be a problem. We've also have a model set of safety guidelines that we will customize for each location. This was put together by the Maple Grove Police Department, and they've given us permission to modify and distribute it for various venues, and I believe that's included in your packet. And we want to thank Maple Grove Police for assisting us with that. We'll be implementing on-site training and orientation for all of our crews so they will be familiar with the materials and the guidelines. Our goal is to make them the same or very similar for all 9 cities, so because we have some staff that work at multiple cities on various nights. One other thing we're recommending is that each city put a peephole in the control room door, and that our staff keep the control room doors closed and locked during the council meetings and only allow people that should be allowed into those areas. And I know that quite a few of the cities have already implemented that or put that in place. So our next step, assuming that we are directed to proceed, is to implement the plan, which includes making web streaming on-demand replays unavailable until they are reset the next morning after the meeting. Request each city participate in developing guidelines and procedures appropriate for their particular location based on a model set of safety guidelines that we've provided, and we can adjust those for each location. We'll post guidelines in City Council Chambers control rooms so our crews have reference material. Communicate those procedural guidelines to our staff. And again, request that each city install peepholes and control room doors. A few are already done. And we have 1 or 2 locations where we need to add telephones in the control room that are not available at this time, so that if there is something where staff needs to call 911 or something, they have available a landline to do that. So that's kind of our recommendation, and I guess I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions? Otherwise, the action is to accept the Policies and Activities Committee report. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item we have is addressing some vacancies on some of our committees.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have several committee openings on the Northwest Community Television Board of Directors. We have, to start out with, on the Executive Committee, we currently have 2 vacancies. And what I did is I basically gave you a little synopsis of what the committee is and in terms of overall time commitment. The first, actually, all 3 of these are generally minimal time commitment if needed, but we certainly would like to fill, if you are a board member and are interested in serving on one of these committees, we'd certainly like to find out if there's an interest on that. So I don't know if we just want to go down and first ask about the Executive Committee and then move down the line. Is there anybody interested on the Executive Committee?
I'd be interested in the Executive Committee.
Okay.
I would also.
Okay, Kirk? Okay. All right, then we have the Budget Committee. We have 2 vacancies on the Budget Committee. Anybody interested on the Budget Committee for the Northwest Community Television Board of Directors?
You gonna draft people?
What, Zipporah and Donald?
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
All right. Zipporah, Massese and Donald Jackson, thank you. And then finally, we have 1 opening on the Policies and Activities Committee. Generally a minimal time commitment, but can vary. In fact, the work that, Tim was just did a presentation here, and that was basically the culmination of the work of the Policy and Activities Committee. So if there's anybody interested in serving on that committee, we do have one opening. Going once. I do know that.
That's the interesting committee.
Yeah, I do know that Helen LaFave at one point expressed interest. She is not here today. So if no one's interested today, can certainly reach out to Helen, because she did express interest at one point a couple months ago about serving on that committee. So I can talk to her if no one would have an issue with that. Okay.
Okay, with that, we have adequate members to fill the openings without any extras. So looking for a motion to appoint the board members who've expressed interest in filling the openings on the Officers and Executive Committee and the Budget Committee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And the next thing is the Executive Director report.
And I am going to make this extremely brief here. One thing, you probably noticed the cameras around here and all the microphones. If you're wondering how you can see this great production, it will we'll have links on the we'll probably put it on the board site too, on both sites. The Cable Commission and the board will put links out there for you. This will be handy too for commissioners who may not be able to attend a meeting. So what I will do is once the report is, I'm sorry, the meeting is uploaded, I will also send all the directors a link to make it even that much easier. They'll go right in your email box and you could watch the meeting with your morning coffee. So, an instant replay.
But do come here because we need quorums.
Yeah, we do need you here. Yeah, we do need our quorums. And certainly, it's great. We'll let the volunteers know that these meetings are on, and it's easy to find them on the internet. And so I wanted to tell you that. And I also wanted to tell you we just finished up our, the audit firm was in our offices the last three days doing field work. Wendy worked closely with them, and things are looking very good along that front. So the field work is done, and then we'll present the full audit at our meeting. We normally present that in September. And then I also wanted to mention, and we'll be talking about awards too later, but they're out in the hallway. We have several awards from we actually received a total of 11 or 12, I think 11 awards from the Eric Severide Awards mainly for journalism. So we compete like with KARE 11, WCCO, both radio, and so all over the Midwest. And I had the opportunity to attend the ceremony in Bloomington with some of our staff members. You see there is Sonia, Shannon, John Jacobson, and Alexandra Renslow. So we're very proud of these awards, and they're sitting out on the table in the hallway if you would like to see them. And I know a little bit later on in the presentation, Barb is going to be talking about some exciting awards received in a Midwest Video Festival. So that concludes my report, and I will pass it on to Dave Kaiser.
I am ready. Good morning. Just make sure the microphone's set there. We have a few video clips to show you, just to give you a recap of some of the things that we have been working on. And Mike, I'll come over and grab the clicker from you.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
As most of you are aware, over the recent months, the two words rail connection have been a hot topic in this area. And one of the neat parts of what we do and are able to provide the cities is with our Community Corner program, if the cities have a topic like that that is coming up and is something of importance to their residents, we will then respond with producing segments for them. So just have a couple quick clips of some of the meetings and some of the programs that actually aired in the first part of this discussion.
We've been following the story about a proposed freight rail connection that would potentially run through parts of Crystal, Robbinsdale, and Golden Valley.
In mid-November of 2014, the city of Crystal learned kind of indirectly through some zoning inquiries that we were receiving that the Burlington Northern Railroad was proposing to buy part or all of the properties at 5140, 5160, and 5170 West Broadway.
So that was the start of the story, again, from the city of Crystal when they learned about what was going on. The next segment then goes to the city of Robbinsdale as it progressed and the opportunity to take some bills to the legislature.
The proposal that BNSF had to connect to the Canadian Pacific Railroad in order to address some congestion issues that they had further down the line. We have been successful so far at the legislature going through with 3 bills. One of the bills talks about railroads and counties and whether railroads can condemn county property. And the other bills relate to making sure that before a connection like that would happen, that there would be an environmental impact statement.
Again, these were both community corner segments, so directed by the cities to let the residents know what was happening, keep them up to date on the process. At the same time, the news was obviously covering the story, and the story then continued on to down to the Capitol. Here's a short clip.
The state, along with our communities, to work together with the railroads to find a real plan. But this section is not going to solve the current problems that they have or the future problems.
We've heard from opponents that the cities in my communities, quite frankly, are being selfish, that they're unwilling to accept congestion in their area and want it somewhere else. And that is just simply not true.
And then the story continued on till, I believe, yesterday or the day before that the bill was passed and it's moving through the political process. So just to show you the power of what we do with our community corner and news segments to keep residents up to date on what's happening. So that's more of a serious note. On a more fun note, your fire departments in the area are having anniversaries this year. So there are 2 cities that we spent some time in our community corner to help celebrate.
40 years ago, we had a rubber coat and we had boots that pulled up, and when we got on the fire truck, you jumped on the back bumper and you held on, and we'd be going down the freeway at 60, 70 miles an hour hanging on to the bar, the handrail on the back of the truck.
So as you can see, things have changed just a little bit. So that was Maple Grove celebrating 40 years. We head down the block to the city of Osseo, and they were celebrating 100 years.
Osseo Fire Chief Pat McGrain talks about the old days of firefighting.
Our original truck was a 1929 Rio. That was the first truck in this station and responded to calls from Corcoran to Maple Grove to Brooklyn Park to Dayton. And these gentlemen went out, and if it was 20 below, they went out. If it was 90, they still went out.
So congratulations to the fire departments. Next to a quick news clip, one of the things the news looks for on a regular basis are unique people that are doing unique things in the area. And there was a story related to canine units in our area and the safety of the dogs. Here's a little clip from that story.
Simple stuff like alcohol to clean out a wound.
Plymouth is one of 2 cities in all of Hennepin County that equips its canine handlers with canine medical kits.
She gave us stuff to start an IV with, so you can, if the dog's dehydrated or something like that, showed us how to do that with our medical training that she provided.
The kits, supplied by a vet to all 3 of Plymouth's canines, have already proved to be a lifesaver. Last summer, Odie got overheated during training.
Once we found out his temperature, found it was so incredibly high, they just quick rushed him to the vet and luckily saved his life. But the vet told us later he more than likely wouldn't have made it due to what he encountered if we wouldn't have acted so quickly and had the stuff on hand.
I have yet to hear one officer say we don't need it.
Longtime animal advocate Joellen Kimmel heard of the lack of kits and got right to work fixing it.
Ultimately, we need to raise about $10,000.
She's raising money to buy supplies like gauze, rubbing alcohol, and medicine, items that could make a big difference in an emergency.
So just to look at some of the unique things happening in the community and some of the unique people that make those things happen. Final clip will take you out to the ball fields. It is the spring sports season. We're already into the playoffs, but Armstrong and Cooper had a big battle in baseball. I wish, John, I had a clip of you announcing, but I think it's Jay here. Here's a little baseball.
And so Wenzel will hit, bases loaded up. Nelson
realized the lead runner didn't go, and he had to slam on the brakes. And then another situation, they probably would have had a play to get him out, but again, didn't want to let that run come in. Here's Wenzel up the middle, not on the throw for a base hit. One run is in. Here comes run number 2, and the throw sailing right at the runner at second. And it is 5-3 Falcons. Wenzel coming up with a clutch hit to knock in a pair.
I think he did get in the back of the head, didn't he? The runner there probably was a little upset. 3-3 seventh inning and a big run to win that game. So an opportunity again for us and our sports crew to head out and cover so many athletes here in the Northwest area and be able to give them some memories of their games. And also the public loves the coverage of the local high school sports. We hear oftentimes of people that attended Armstrong, attended Cooper, the other schools that just love to see their teams continue that tradition on. So that is our report. Barb, pass it over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Just kind of a quick look at what's going on in the Access Department. First thing, we did a little updating on our digs around here. We added a couple of new site curtains. I have to say, hands off, we decided to save some money and install them ourselves. And so Tamisha and Javi, and I have to give Chris Sainert a little something too. They all went to work and helped us hang those. I have to say, especially to Javi, he had to crimp, I think, about 180 of these chains. He was cutting and crimping. He said, he's got a lot of wrist strength now from all of that. But they were original to the building in 1999, so we did a little bit of updating with that. We're really excited about our new Evo storage and our new iMacs. They just took a quick snapshot of volunteer Rita Fox working in the edit suite. Some hats off to Sean for getting that all organized for us. So we have brand new storage, brand new iMacs, and it's been great. Now all of the volunteers have a lot more room for storing their projects. A lot of our things are shot in HD, which demand just more space. So that has been working well. It's kind of like our second week of the new iMacs, and things are going good. Next, I just wanted to say that our second Share Your Passion promo is airing on Comcast and our channels. Nikki is already working on our third. Our second features Lindsay. She's our 30-year-old producer, and we are getting to work on one that is going to be featuring more of people who are interested in coming in to be technical crew. She's planning to shoot that one in June, and we hope to get it out on the channels in July, hopefully. So that's been going. Also next, we are working on Super Saturday, which is a big event we do every year. These are just some shots from last year's. I believe Scott was in ours last year. We do this every year where we do all of our classes in one day. We already have, I think, 21 people signed up in a waiting list of about 10. So it's kind of a big deal. So that is going to be happening May 30th. And then next, Mike had mentioned earlier, I'm so proud of my staff. They won 5 awards in the Best of the Midwest video conference. That's an Alliance for Community Media. It's kind of their Miss Midwest award ceremony. They won, 1 Excellent Award, 2 Achievement Awards, and then 2 Merit Awards. We have also entered the National ACM competition, so we're excited about that. And then really just wanted to kind of give you a heads up on what we're working on this summer. Obviously, channel realignment is going to be at the top of our list. Also, Nikki Jackett is working on producing, it's kind of a volunteer staff effort. It's going to be a cooking show where we're going to actually be featuring local chefs from all of our cities. And we're hoping that this will be possibly an ongoing program that we can play both on our channels and possibly on Channel 12 as well. That we're going to be doing a kickoff with that in July. It does not have a name yet, but more information on that will follow. And then also for volunteers, we're planning a mini conference, just kind of focusing on some more advanced training. We do a lot of basic training, but we also want to provide advanced training for our more veteran volunteers. And so that is scheduled currently for the end of August. And so that's what we have going on. So any questions? All right, thank you.
Stats for the, since the beginning of the year are in your packet. Just one note there, April, we had an all-time high of YouTube views, over 143,000 times somebody viewed one of our videos on YouTube in the month of April. So becoming very popular. I can't attribute it. I looked at the stats to see if there was one particular item that people were looking at, and no, there was a lot of different things. So it's not just driven by one item. I think there was perhaps 9,000 views on a Barway Collins story or something like that, but of the 143,000, that it's just a small percentage. So we're looking at across the board a lot of our stuff. I've hired a couple of new part-time people for city halls openings. We are involved in Brooklyn Center council chambers remodeling, have had a couple of meetings on that, and another one scheduled to talk about the design for the new DIAS and remodeling of the chambers physically as well as the audiovisual systems. And today, Sean and Jamie and I are touring all 9 city halls with CenturyLink technical representatives so that they can see what they're up against to provide the services that are required under the franchise for broadcasting of city meetings and the signals, because it basically becomes a whole second system, not a second camera system, but the signals, how they get from City Hall out to subscribers. And so that is our challenge today, is to get to 9 city halls before they close at 4:30. And we have a schedule. So that's all I have, if there aren't any questions. Thank you.
Does that conclude our staff reports? Okay. And finally, something fun, we have our staff employment anniversary recognition. We've got quite a few staff members who've been with us for years in the initial posse group, so we wanted to do
We'd like to
these.
say a few words and then we'd like to mention these names, and when we're done with each person, we'd like you to come up and get a service award. To start out with, I wanted to mention Wendy Brierly. She's been here for 25 years. She is administrative assistant, my right-hand person. There's no task she won't do in terms of getting things done administratively here, always willing to take on new assignments. She's handling human resources and enjoys everything she does here, and so a quarter of century sounds like a long time, and it is, and we're happy that Wendy has reached her 25-year anniversary. So Wendy, if you'll come up, and we'll have both Al and Marcia recognize you with a little service plaque here. Thank you, Wendy. Next, we want to recognize John Jacobson. John Jacobson probably needs no introduction. He's the face of sports in the northwest suburbs. I'm sure he can go to any store in the northwest suburbs, and instead of asking to see his ID, they already know who he is, because he's well known. He can walk into any high school, both him and Jay Wilcox, and he's instantly recognized. So you probably never get to see him here in person. He actually is real. It's really John, and he's been doing sports here for 25 years, and he's been doing just a fabulous job, and we're very happy to have him on staff, and we want to congratulate John on his 25 years. Next, we want to introduce Andy Jar. Andy's been with us for 25 years. He's a photographer, and Andy is oftentimes on top of press boxes at football stadiums, soccer fields, baseball fields. No matter what the temperature is, no matter how hard the wind is blowing, and I've been at some of these events, and I've looked up there and I'm going, oh wow, there's Andy. He's getting the highlight footage when you have horizontal rain flying in your face. He's the guy behind the scenes capturing those moments of all the amazing sports that John and his crew present on TV. And so Andy, thank you for your 25 years of service. Come on up. All right. This group, I've had the pleasure of working with from day one. I've known them, well, it goes all the way back. We're coming, let's see, officially this coming Saturday, I believe, if that's May 24th, Saturday or Sunday, it will be the official 30-year anniversary. May 24th, 1985 is a significant date in our history because that is the official date that the Northwest Community Television Board and the Cable Commission took over all the local programming operations. Prior to that date, the cable company ran all the local programming. So all four of these individuals worked for the cable company prior to that. So they actually, in terms of community programming, they have even more than 30 years of service, but with our organization, they have a solid 30, and some of them started in late 1982, some in 83, and some in 84. It was probably one of the better decisions back then to have Northwest Community Television take over community programming, because had it been cable company run at the time, I don't know if we would all even be here, because local programming has been more of a burden, and it's like a second thought to the cable company. Their focus is on gaining cable customers and installing, and quite frankly, it was more of an afterthought for them. We know that they like what we do here. I mean, we've heard from the top local administrators from the cable company that what's happening here at this organization is phenomenal. They just didn't have the ways and the means to make that operate back in the early 80s, and so put the emphasis over to and control over to the Northwest Community Television Board. So it's really been a wonderful opportunity working with these folks. I know Tim started out, I believe he was an education assistant, and I'd like to mention a little bit about him. He's currently our Municipal Media Services Manager. He has been around again since day one. All the cities know him. He can walk into City Hall and I don't even know if he has to show a security badge. They just know it's Tim. But Tim has done a phenomenal job throughout his career here at Northwest Community Television. And Tim, if you will come up, and we'd like to recognize you for your 30 years of service to our organization. Thanks, Tim. I'm going to skip my name right now. I'll go down to Dave Kaiser. I have a hard time talking about myself, so I will talk a little bit about Dave. Dave started at the cable company like the four of us did. I believe, Dave, you started in, you were doing customer service, construction complaints. Exactly. With Store Cable. I remember that the day Dave started. So he was over there back in the days when Store Cable was ripping up the public rights away, and I mean literally ripping it up and not restoring property, and it was a total mess. They had contractors from all over the country working up here getting this system built, and Dave Kaiser was there working behind the scenes prior to this organization taking over the operation. But that's where he got his start, and then got into local programming with the cable company shortly thereafter. Dave basically will do just about any task here. He's super positive. He can be on air. He could manage and edit. He has all the, jack of all trades is Dave Kaiser. He can do it. He can do it all. And I'm very proud of Dave and all the work he's done. And it's great to have him as my assistant here, Assistant Executive Director and Programming Manager. And we want to thank you, Dave, for all that you've done.
That's right. It's tough.
And Barb Nolan Clark. All of you know Barb as our Community Access Manager. Barb has, I've got to tell you a little funny story about Barb. Prior to her being hired by Northwest Community Television, she was hired by a committee. It was a committee of Northwest Community Television that had basically the say and made a recommendation to the cable company to say, okay, we are okay if you hire this person. Well, Barb, I'm going to go on record and say that Barb had the most difficult interview of all time of any staff member here, because her first interview was in a conference room with probably 8 to 10 people surrounding her, peppering her with questions like, if 2 volunteers showed up at the studio at the same time, what would you do? Who would you give the studio space to first? And as she was answering all these questions, there was a volunteer from the publicity committee of the group that was taking pictures, close-ups and far away, and I really felt bad for Barb, but the bottom line is Barb survived that interview, and so went on to, she started out, I remember her first day at the Plymouth. We had satellite studios throughout the northwest suburbs. One was in New Hope, one was in Maple Grove, Brooklyn Center, and then one in Plymouth. She started out at the Plymouth studio. That was another ice station Zebra at the time. There wasn't much out there. And so she had handled community access in that facility, and then ultimately came on to become our community access manager. Barb is a super positive person. She works great with her staff, and she's just done a phenomenal job in community TV over the years. And we want to thank you, Barb, for your 30 years of service.
Who's going to talk about you?
The only thing I want to say is I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I worked in Fridley. They needed somebody to come over here and do local programming. I actually started out as a college intern in Fridley, and so when I see interns go through the doors here, I say, hey, you know, I started out as an intern when I was going to college doing local programming, and I've enjoyed working here ever since, and I thank Greg Moore for all the times we worked together, and you know, him showing me kind of the what to do in terms of working with agendas and so forth and so on, and he had a lot of faith and trust in me and the entire group, and so I can't do what I do without all of these people here, and I truly mean that. These folks, not only this group here, but everybody, they're really a solid group of individuals that you'd want on staff, so I really want to thank them.
Well, I want to just comment about Mike. It's been my pleasure to work with him. When Greg retired, it was a natural to move Mike into the executive director spot, and it was just a smooth transition. Everything went very, very well. He keeps everybody up to date. He's professional. He does things in a right way, and so I think Mike has just been an outstanding 30-year employee, but also an outstanding executive director for us, and so another 30 years out of you.
Oh, no.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes our business. Wendy?
I just want to point some pictures
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Nice.
They had a mustache. Yeah, there is some history there. Wow. We all started, quite honestly, we all started in our early 20s, and we're all aging gracefully here at Northwest Community Television.
And just as a surprise, the 30 years do not know this. We have a breakfast for them and a cake outside waiting for them.
Wow, this is a
So
surprise.
welcome to come join.
So enjoy the breakfast.
Well, thank you. And we'll recognize the employees again at the end of the year when we normally do our staff. We do a normal staff function at the end of the year around Christmas time, so thank you.
Okay, so if there's a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn. Yep, second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And breakfast.